Hey guys, tonight we drift into the endless Arctic twilight, where the sun barely grazes the horizon and shadows stretch for miles like living maps. You probably won't survive this. Not because it's dangerous, but because the cold is so quiet, so heavy, it could lull you into forgetting your own name. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you listening from tonight? Tap it into the comments, I read every one. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into the story of the shadow compass. Your eyelids flutter open to a world washed in blue. The air is sharp, so crisp it feels like glass in your lungs. Above you, the sky hangs low, a pale dome smudged with clouds. But the real map isn't overhead, it's underfoot, painted in long, slanting shadows that stretch across the snow like fingers pointing the way. You kneel, brushing frost from a drift. The Inuit call this kilak, the time when the sun hesitates, neither rising nor setting, and the land becomes a puzzle of darkness and light. Your guide, a man whose name means he who reads the wind, hands you a carved bone tool. It's shorter than your palm, tapered at one end. Watch, he murmurs, you plant it upright in the snow. The shadow it casts is impossibly long, a black needle against the white. He traces its tip with a mittened finger. This way, he says, is where the seals breathe. You squint. There are no landmarks, no stars, just the slow creep of the shadow's edge. But he sees what you don't, the way the shadow bends slightly at the tip, pulled by some invisible current. The wind, maybe, or the earth itself, humming beneath the ice. Historians still debate how Inuit navigators crossed thousands of miles without compasses. Some say they memorized snowdrift shapes. Others swear they followed the scent of salt water. But tonight, you're learning the truth, they listened to shadows. A shadow in morning light leans west. At midday, it's a stubby circle. By dusk, it yawns eastward if there's a dusk. Here in the endless twilight, shadows don't turn, they stretch, and if you watch long enough, they'll whisper. You shift your weight and the snow creaks like a ship's hull. The cold is seeping through your caribou-hide boots now, a dull ache in your toes. Your guide chuckles. First lesson, he says. Cold isn't your enemy, impatience is. He pulls a strip of dried char from his pouch and offers half. The fish is leathery, salt-crusted. It tastes like the ocean froze and someone chewed it. You grin. Arctic fast food. A gust ruffles your hood. The shadow stick trembles. Somewhere far off, a sheet of ice groans, a sound like a giant rolling over in its sleep. Your guide tilts his head. That's the sea telling us where not to step, he says. You'll learn that sound later, the difference between safe ice and hungry ice. But for now, there's just the shadow, the fish, and the feeling that you're being watched. You glance over your shoulder. Nothing, just snow and sky, and yet there's a prickle at your neck. Maybe it's the Tariaksuk, the shadow people said to trail behind travelers, mimicking their steps, or maybe it's just the wind teasing. Your guide stands, brushing snow from his knees. Enough for tonight, he says, but as you turn to go, you catch it, the barest shift in the shadow's edge, a flicker like a page turning. You blink. Was that? He smiles. Ah. You saw it. The crunch of your boots is too loud here. Each step cracks through the silence like a gunshot, sending invisible ripples across the tundra. You freeze mid-stride, suddenly aware of how foreign your movements are in this landscape. A child could track you from a mile away, the heavy, impatient footsteps of someone who's never learned to walk on the bones of the earth. Your guide, who moves like a shadow himself, turns back. Without a word, he sinks slowly into a crouch, pressing one mittened hand flat against the snow. You mimic him, feeling the cold bite through your layers. He tilts his head. Listen. At first, there's nothing. Then beneath the whisper of wind, you catch it, a rhythmic creaking, softer than a heartbeat. Caribou, he murmurs. 100 yards away, their gray-brown bodies blend into the winter scrub like ghosts. They move differently than you, each hoof placed with deliberate lightness, their weight distributed so evenly they barely dent the frost. The lead doe pauses, nostrils flaring. For one breathless moment, you're certain she's caught your scent. But then she dips her head and continues, her herd flowing around her like water around a stone. Now, your guide whispers, walk like them. You try, it's harder than it looks. The trick isn't in the feet, you realize, but in the knees, letting them absorb each step like springs. Your thighs burn within minutes. The Inuit hunters called this kanik tuanik, the art of becoming part of the landscape. Historians often mistake it for simple stealth, but it's more than that. It's patience crystallized into motion. A snowflake lands on your eyelashes, then another. Within minutes, the air fills with them, not falling so much as suspended, like the sky is exhaling. Your guide stops near a wind-scoured rock and runs his fingers along its edge. The leeward side wears a delicate rime of frost feathers, each one a record of yesterday's wind direction. He snaps one off and hands it to you. It melts on your tongue before you can taste it. Some hunters, he says, could follow a week-old trail by licking the snow. You make a face, he laughs, the first full laugh you've heard from him, and pulls a strip of something dark from his pouch. Try this instead. It's dried lichen, bitter as burnt coffee, but it coats your mouth in a way that heightens every other flavor. Suddenly you can taste the iron in the air, the distant salt of sea ice. A sound makes you both turn. The caribou have vanished. In their place, a lone Arctic fox trots across your abandoned trail, pausing to sniff at one of your deep, clumsy footprints. It sneezes. See, your guide nods at the fox. Even he thinks you walk funny. Your breath hangs before you in a frozen cloud, each exhale a fleeting sculpture in the Arctic air. You never realized before how much warmth escapes with every word, how careless you've been, spilling your own heat into the wind like coins tossed into a well. Now, as the temperature plummets, you learn to measure your breaths like currency. Your guide notices you huffing into your mittens and shakes his head. Too fast, he murmurs. He demonstrates slow, steady exhales through his nose, the steam curling in thin ribbons that linger just long enough to show the wind's path before vanishing. Watch, he turns slightly, letting his next breath trail sideways like a flag. The vapor doesn't rise, it's pulled eastward, revealing an invisible current you'd never have noticed. You try to mimic him, but your impatient lungs betray you. Your breath billows out in great wasteful gusts. The third time you exhale too forcefully, your guide reaches out and gently pinches your nostrils shut with his frost-rimed mittens. You splutter, eyes watering in the cold. Small, he says, releasing you, like sipping hot broth. The next breath comes easier. You imagine it's summer, that you're blowing across the surface of a steaming bowl of Accutac, the whipped fat and berries they call Arctic ice cream. The steam forms a delicate thread this time, quivering but holding its shape. Your guide nods approval. Historians often marvel at how Inuit travelers could navigate whiteouts where sky and ground blurred into nothingness. The answer is here, in these vanishing breaths. Each exhale becomes a compass needle, revealing wind patterns that whisper of open lades or pressure ridges still miles ahead. You learn to read them like tea leaves, the way your breath clings stubbornly in certain spots, cold air pooling in hollows, or gets torn to shreds suddenly, sign of a crevasse's updraft. A sudden gust sends your next breath swirling around your face in an icy halo. You blink away the frost forming on your lashes. Somewhere in the archives of Arctic exploration, there's a diary entry from a lost European expedition that mentions this phenomenon, how the men's frozen breath coated their beards until they could no longer open their mouths to eat. They saw it as a curse. You run your tongue over your own lips, tasting the faint metallic tang of condensed breath, and understand it differently now, each crystal a tiny timekeeper, proof you're still warm enough to melt them. Your guide produces 2 strips of dried seal meat from his pouch. The first he lets you chew normally, it's like gnawing on salty leather. The second he has you hold in your mouth without chewing, letting your breath soften it slowly. Minutes pass, the meat grows pliant, releasing flavors of iron and ocean. When you finally bite down, the taste is startlingly rich, like the difference between hearing a song through a wall and standing in the concert hall. Breath is time, he says, watching a wisp of steam curl toward the northeast, and time is direction. You follow his gaze, the vapor points like an arrow to where, 3 days' journey by your reckoning, a fishing camp should lie. Or perhaps it's just the wind's whim, but when you glance back at your guide, he's already packing up, certain in a way you can't yet fathom. A snow bunting flits past, its wings stirring the air where your last breath still lingers. For a heartbeat, the tiny bird seems to ride the vapor like a wave before vanishing into the white. Wind doesn't howl here, it tells stories. You press your back against a hummock of snow and close your eyes, letting the currents flow over you like invisible rivers. At first it's just noise, then slowly the voices emerge. There's the calarac, the high, whining thread that means open water is near. Beneath it, the silap appa rumbles, the deep-throated groan of sea ice settling. Your guide cups his mittens behind his ears like satellite dishes, turning his head until the wind fills the hollows. He nods toward the east. That one, he says, is lying. You strain to hear what he hears. The eastern wind does sound different, sharper, with a brittle edge like cracking porcelain. Pressure ridge, he explains, ice fighting ice. He scoops a handful of snow and lets it fall in a thin stream. The grains don't drift straight down but spiral clockwise, caught in some microcurrent. Wind here speaks in circles. You learn the dialects of the air like a child learning vowels. The katabatic wind rolls down from the glaciers with a weight that presses your parka hood flat against your skull. It carries the scent of ancient snow, compressed so tightly it tastes like licking a battery. The pie-track arrives without warning, a screaming downdraft that can strip tents from their stakes. When you feel its first prickle on your neck, your guide doesn't warn you. He simply drops flat to the ice, and you follow just as the gust roars overhead like a freight train made of ghosts. Historians still argue over how Inuit forecast storms days in advance. The answer is tangled in these winds. Your guide points to sastrugi, those wave-like snow ridges carved by persistent winds. Their sharp edges face the direction of the last storm, their gentle slopes point toward the next. You run your fingers along them and feel the weather's bones. A sudden silence falls, even the snow grains seem to hover midair. Your guide goes very still. Then, so faint you think you imagined it, comes a sound like a comb being dragged across crystal. Canik, he whispers, the snow-eating wind, you taste copper. The air itself seems charged, as if the sky is holding its breath. Then the first grain strikes your cheek, not snow, but ice spicules hurled horizontal. Within minutes, the world dissolves into a hissing white torrent. Your guide grabs your wrist and pulls you into the lee of a pressure ridge. Here, sheltered from the wind's teeth, he unwraps a sliver of walrus tusk carved with spirals. Great-grandfather's wind map, he says, running a thumb along the grooves. Each curve corresponds to a coastal headland. Each notch marks where eddies pool. It's not just a map, you realize, but a musical score. The ridges are spaced to hum at specific wind speeds when stroked. You press your forehead against the ice wall as the storm screams past. Somewhere beneath your feet, the frozen sea sings back, a deep, resonant ohm that vibrates up through your boots. Your guide smiles. Now you hear it, he says. The first word. The wind doesn't howl here, it tells stories. You press your back against a hummock of snow and close your eyes, letting the currents flow over you like invisible rivers. At first, it's just noise. Then slowly the voices emerge. There's the kalarak, the high, whining thread that means open water is near. Beneath it, the silap appa rumbles, the deep-throated groan of sea ice settling. Your guide cups his mittens behind his ears like satellite dishes, turning his head until the wind fills the hollows. He nods toward the east. That one, he says, is lying. You strain to hear what he hears. The eastern wind does sound different, sharper, with a brittle edge like cracking porcelain. Pressure ridge, he explains. Ice fighting ice. He scoops a handful of snow and lets it fall in a thin stream. The grains don't drift straight down but spiral clockwise, caught in some microcurrent. Wind here speaks in circles. You learn the dialects of the air like a child learning vowels. The katabatic wind rolls down from the glaciers with a weight that presses your parka hood flat against your skull. It carries the scent of ancient snow, compressed so tightly it tastes like licking a battery. The pie-track arrives without warning, a screaming downdraft that can strip tents from their stakes. When you feel its first prickle on your neck, your guide doesn't warn you. He simply drops flat to the ice, and you follow just as the gust roars overhead like a freight train made of ghosts. Historians still argue over how Inuit forecast storms days in advance. The answer is tangled in these winds. Your guide points to sastrugi, those wave-like snow ridges carved by persistent winds. Their sharp edges face the direction of the last storm, their gentle slopes point toward the next. You run your fingers along them and feel the weather's bones. A sudden silence falls, even the snow grains seem to hover midair. Your guide goes very still. Then, so faint you think you imagined it, comes a sound like a comb being dragged across crystal. Canik, he whispers, the snow-eating wind, you taste copper. The air itself seems charged, as if the sky is holding its breath. Then the first grain strikes your cheek, not snow, but ice spicules hurled horizontal. Within minutes, the world dissolves into a hissing white torrent. Your guide grabs your wrist and pulls you into the lee of a pressure ridge. Here, sheltered from the wind's teeth, he unwraps a sliver of walrus tusk carved with spirals. Great-grandfather's wind map, he says, running a thumb along the grooves. Each curve corresponds to a coastal headland. Each notch marks where eddies pool. It's not just a map, you realize, but a musical score. The ridges are spaced to hum at specific wind speeds when stroked. You press your forehead against the ice wall as the storm screams past. Somewhere beneath your feet, the frozen sea sings back, a deep, resonant ohm that vibrates up through your boots. Your guide smiles. Now you hear it, he says. The first word. The clouds swallow the stars whole tonight. You tilt your head back until your neck aches, searching for Polaris, Orion, any familiar anchor in this featureless black bowl. But the sky refuses to cooperate. It's like staring at the ceiling of a cave, the kind where even echoes get swallowed. Your guide notices you're squinting and chuckles. He taps your forehead with one mittened finger. "Stop looking up," he says. Then he peels back his own parka hood and closes his eyes, not searching the sky, but remembering it. "Nannerjuk," he murmurs, pointing northwest where the polar star should be. Tuctor Jewett, his hand arcs east, tracing an invisible belt. You recognize the constellation names, but not the shapes he's drawing. The Inuit didn't connect stars into hunters and bulls. They saw them as tracks, distant snow holes where celestial caribou broke through the sky ice. He pulls a length of sinew from his pouch and begins weaving it between his fingers. The pattern emerges slowly. A web of intersecting lines that somehow suggests the night sky's scaffolding. "My uncle's star map," he explains. Each loop represents a star's seasonal path. Each knot marks where key constellations touch the horizon. You realize with a start that it's not just a map, it's a calendar. The Pleiades position when the ice is thickest, Vega's rising when the Arctic char run. Historians love debating why Inuit astronomy focused so intensely on horizon stars while Western traditions prioritized zenith. The answer is written in snow. You try his method, lying flat on your back, letting the cold seep through your parka as you visualize the sky. Without the distraction of actual stars, patterns emerge more clearly. The way Civilik, the first ones, always point toward open lades, how Ogjuk's position foretells the return of sunlight. Your guide rolls onto his side and scoops a handful of snow. With deliberate strokes, he etches a series of arcs into the surface. "Moon's path last winter," he says, then adds overlapping curves. "This winter." The lines intersect at precise points, dates you realize, when lunar cycles aligned with seal migrations. A faint green shimmer pulses along the horizon. At first you think it's your eyes playing tricks, but then the aurora unfolds like a slow-motion lightning strike. Your guide doesn't seem impressed. "Aksarniit," he mutters. Sky Fox is playing with a walrus skull. He makes a flicking gesture at the wavering lights as if shooing away mosquitoes. You're about to ask why when the answer comes to you. Navigators distrust the aurora. Its magnetic tantrums scramble the very cues you're learning to trust. The realization makes you grin. Even the Inuit have their weather channel skeptics. The clouds part briefly, revealing a single star. Not Polaris, but Uluktut, the runner. Your guide nods toward it, then to a nearly invisible depression in the snow ahead. "There," he says, "next breathing hole." You blink, the star and the snow dip don't align at all. But when you take 10 paces forward, your boot breaks through into slushy seawater. A seal's dark nose surfaces moments later, nostrils flaring as it takes its first breath in 20 minutes. The star winks overhead, its light older than navigation itself. A dark shape breaks the ice's monotony, a smooth dome rising slightly above the frozen surface. You tense instinctively, hand reaching for a harpoon that isn't there. But your guide makes no move to hunt. Instead, he sinks to his knees a respectful distance away, watching the seal's breathing hole with the patience of a monk at meditation. The seal surfaces with a wet gasp, its whiskers glistening. For 3 heartbeats it stares directly at you, black eyes unblinking, nostrils flaring to take your scent. Then it vanishes with barely a ripple. You count the seconds. 1 minute passes, 2. At 3 minutes 47 seconds you're tracking now, fascinated, the nose reappears exactly where it left. "Karalik," your guide whispers, the teacher seal. You expect a lesson in hunting, but what comes is stranger. He pulls a small bladder of oil from his pack and lets a single drop fall onto the ice. It spreads in a perfect circle, rainbow-edged where it catches the weak sunlight. "Watch how she surfaces," he says. The next time the seal appears, you notice it, the way its body barely disturbs the water, rising with such control that the hole's edges remain crisp. No wasted movement, no panic, just precise, economical survival. Historians often frame indigenous hunting as mere subsistence, but kneeling here you realize it's advanced physics. The seal's buoyancy is perfect, enough fat to stay warm, not so much that surfacing requires struggle. Its dives follow pressure gradients you can't see. Even its breath cycle is a masterclass in efficiency. Quick exhalation before diving to minimize nitrogen absorption, lungs collapsing in a way that would kill a human. Your guide passes you a piece of muktuk, raw beluga skin and blubber. It's chewy with a taste like oceanic butter. As you gnaw, he points to the ice around the breathing hole. Count the cracks. At first glance, they seem random. But as you study them, a pattern emerges, radial fractures spaced almost evenly, like clock numbers. "Her flippers," he explains. The seal maintains this hole by scratching at the ice's underside in a precise rotation, preventing freeze-over without weakening the structure. You're witnessing millennia of marine engineering written in frost fractures. A sudden splash makes you jump. The seal has slapped its tail once, twice before disappearing. Your guide laughs at your startled expression. "Not warning others," he says, breaking up bubbles. He mimes a diver's motion, palms sweeping downward to disperse an ascending air trail. The cleverness of it hits you. This animal understands acoustics well enough to mask its own sonar signature. The cold is creeping into your knees now. You shift position and the ice groans treacherously beneath you. The seal's head pops up immediately, much closer this time. It studies you with what you swear is amusement before exhaling sharply through its nose, a sound uncannily like a human scoff, and diving again. "Lesson over," your guide says, standing, but as you turn to leave, something makes you glance back. The seal is watching from a new hole 20 yards away, its head cocked as if waiting to see if you've learned anything at all. Your boots tell stories you can't read yet. The left sole wears thin near the ball of your foot, a testament to years of pushing off ice ridges with that same motion. The right tread holds deeper grooves, chewed by gravel you've unknowingly crossed. Your guide notices you staring and crouches, tracing a finger along the stitching with the reverence of an archivist handling parchment. "Here," he says, tapping a nearly invisible repair near your little toe. "This thread is caribou tendon." The darker patch means the animal was autumn-killed, its sinews tougher from summer grazing. He rotates your foot, revealing how the sole's curve matches the arch of your stride perfectly. "These boots walked from Igloolik to Hall Beach before you were born." You flex your toes, suddenly aware of wearing someone else's history. The boots aren't just footwear, they're living maps, the extra layer of sealskin over the instep. That's for kicking snow off ice fishing holes without tearing the hide. The asymmetrical lacing, it accounts for how most right-handed people drag that foot slightly when tired. Every stitch is an adaptation to problems you didn't know existed. Historians often overlook footwear as technology, focusing instead on flashier tools like harpoons or kayaks. But you're beginning to understand, these boots are the Arctic's original GPS. Your guide shows you how to read fresh snow by dragging a toe experimentally. The squeak pitch reveals temperature. Resistance indicates depth to the next wind crust. When you scrape across a patch that vibrates your teeth oddly, he nods, phrasal ice underneath. Dangerous. He produces a worn awl and a length of sinew. Without a word, you understand the invitation. Kneeling together, he guides your hands through adding a new stitch to reinforce the left heel. The technique feels ancient, piercing upward through existing holes rather than down, creating self-locking knots that tighten with use. As you work, he shares the bootmaker's mantra, not to make the path easier, but the walker stronger. A sudden gust sends powder snow skittering across your work. Instinctively, you cup your hands around the boot, not to protect it from the wind, but to catch the snow grains now collecting in its creases. Your guide watches approvingly as you rub the granules into the seams. "Winter wax," he explains. The snow melts just enough from your body heat to waterproof the stitches, then refreezes into a flexible seal. You take 3 experimental steps in the repaired boots. Something has changed, not in the footwear, but in your awareness of it. Each footfall now feels like a collaboration with every wearer who came before. When your pinky toe brushes a rock, you don't just feel pressure, you sense the stone's roundness, its likely origin from the Esker Ridge to the west. Your guide sees your realization and smiles. He points to a barely visible scuff mark near the toe. "Next lesson starts there," he says. "But for now, the boots have stories to carry and miles yet to map." You press your ear to the ice and the frozen world sings back. At first it's just a vague vibration, the kind you'd ignore if your cheek weren't pressed against the flow. Then the tones resolve, high, glassy notes skittering like dropped needles, countered by deep bass hums that resonate in your molars. Your guide watches your widened eyes and nods. "Canuck," he murmurs, "the ice that talks." You're hearing the frozen sea's secret language, those crystalline high notes, their stress fractures forming in thin ice, early warning systems. The low drones come from far below, where massive ice keels grind against the seafloor like cello bows. Your guide demonstrates how to tap a mittened knuckle against the surface, then interpret the returning echoes. A dull thunk means safe thickness, a ringing ping, danger. Historians often marvel at how Inuit travelers crossed seemingly identical ice fields without drowning. The answer vibrates through your skull right now. They listen to the soundtrack of safety. You learn to distinguish the ting of freshwater ice, brittle, treacherous, from the tonk of saltwater ice, flexible, stronger. There's even a distinct warble that means seal breathing hole nearby, the sound of water pulsing through a narrow opening. Your guide produces a curious tool, a carved bone resonator shaped like a tuning fork. He strikes it against his knee, then touches it to the ice. The amplified sound reveals something astonishing. Harmonic overprints from yesterday's wind, still vibrating in the frozen matrix. It's like hearing weather history recorded in ice grooves. A sudden crack sends you scrambling back. But your guide just chuckles and points to where the sound originated, a pressure ridge 50 paces away. Good ice, he says, settling, not splitting. He places your palm flat on the shuddering surface. The vibration feels alive, like feeling a whale's heartbeat through a ship's hull. You try an experiment, humming different pitches against the ice. Most dissipate instantly. But when you hit a particular low G, the entire sheet seems to hum back, sympathetic vibrations traveling outward in visible ripples across the snow crust. Your guide raises an eyebrow. Apparently you've stumbled upon the flow's resonant frequency. The lesson shifts when you discover a patch that produces no sound at all. Dead zones, your guide calls them, pockets where snow has insulated the ice, creating acoustic voids. These are the true danger spots. Silent killers that won't warn before collapsing. He shows you how to detect them by the way snow grains refuse to bounce when dropped. As twilight deepens, the ice's song changes key. The high notes soften. The bass tones grow more pronounced. Your guide packs up the resonator. Lullaby time, he says. Night ice sings slower, its crystals rearranging in the dark. You take one last listen before standing. Somewhere beneath you, two ice sheets rub together, producing a sound eerily like a woman humming. Your guide nods solemnly. Sedna is restless tonight. The sea ice holds its breath, and so do you. Salt stains bloom like frost flowers across your mittens, each crystalline pattern a fleeting record of where seawater has licked then retreated. You rub your thumb across the crust, tasting the ocean's metallic tang when you next touch your lips. Your guide notices and nods approvingly. Terrierinic, he says, reading the tides without water. You're learning the Arctic's cruelest trick. Even frozen solid, the sea still breathes. Those salt stains mark the high tide line from 3 days ago, preserved like a frozen watermark. The faint ridges in the snow at your feet, their tidal ripples fossilized by wind. Your guide scrapes a fingernail along one. The granules roll differently depending on whether the tide was coming or going when they formed. Historians often assume indigenous tide knowledge came from direct observation. But here, where the ocean is locked under 6 feet of ice for 9 months, the clues are subtler. Your guide shows you how to spot the tide trees, frost feathers that grow diagonally on pressure ridges, their angles revealing the last full moon's pull. He points out barely visible dimples in the ice where saltwater wells up during spring tides, then freezes into tiny brine lenses. A sudden gust makes you blink. When your eyes reopen, your guide is holding a sliver of walrus ivory carved with notches. My grandfather's tide stick, he explains. Each groove corresponds to a day in the lunar cycle. Deeper marks show when neap tides made hunting dangerous. You run your finger along the ancient markings and feel the rhythm, not just of the moon, but of generations who trusted this ivory more than any clock. The lesson turns tactile when he has you press bare hands against a tidal crack. The ice burns, but beneath that pain comes revelation, a faint, regular pulsing. Swells from Baffin Bay, he says. 300 miles away, you're feeling the ocean's heartbeat through its frozen skin. Hunger gnaws at you. Your guide produces 2 strips of dried kelp, one harvested at high tide, pliable, almost sweet, the other at low, brittle, intensely salty. The difference is staggering. He grins at your expression. Tide clocks taste better than they look. As you chew, he scrapes snow off a boulder, revealing a line of rust-colored lichen exactly at knee height. Tide mark from when this was shoreline, he says. The realization hits, you're standing where waves crashed centuries before your birth. The ice, the stains, the very salt on your tongue are all pages in a hydrological history book. A snowflake lands on the tide stick, melting just enough to make the oldest notch glisten. For a heartbeat, you swear you can hear the sea sighing beneath your feet. The cold isn't what makes you shiver, it's the Silarjuak. You first feel it as a creeping numbness in your left pinky toe, an insidious thief of warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. Your guide notices you wiggling your foot and grunts. He rummages through his pack and produces a pair of lumpy caribou hide socks, their seams stitched with what looks like braided grass. Wear these inside out, he instructs. You obey, though the socks feel bizarre, the hairy hide side against your skin, the smooth side facing out. Within minutes, the tingling in your toe subsides, your guide explains. The hairs create microscopic air pockets that circulate body heat, while the outer layer sheds wind like a duck's feathers. Sown during waning moon, he adds, as if this explains everything. When you look puzzled, he taps the stitches. The grass isn't grass at all, but dried sedge roots collected only in autumn, when their capillary structure changes to maximize insulation. Historians often dismiss indigenous clothing as primitive, but as you flex your now toasty toes, you realize these socks are more advanced than any modern thermal gear. The irregular stitching isn't haphazard, it creates graduated compression zones to manage blood flow. The lumps are strategically placed muskox wool pads that act as thermal batteries. Even the sock's musty smell serves a purpose. The slight odor of fermented urine, a tanning agent, repels frostbite by stimulating microcirculation. A gust cuts through your parka, and for the first time you notice what's missing, the squeak of nylon. Caribou hide moves silently because its hollow hairs trap sound as well as heat. Your guide demonstrates by rubbing two patches together. No rustle, just a faint hiss like wind over dunes. Hunters could approach seals within feet without detection. The lesson turns practical when he has you chew a bitter root, masu, for the blood, not the belly, and time how long it takes for your saliva to warm it. At 3 minutes, your mouth floods with unexpected heat. Good circulation, he approves. Then comes the real test. He tosses a handful of snow into the air. Before it lands, you must blow a steady stream of breath to deflect every flake. Fail and the Silarjuek steals another toe's warmth. You fail spectacularly. Snow dusts your face as your guide chuckles, but on the fourth try, you discover the trick. Breathe through your teeth, creating a laminar flow that parts the snow like Moses with frost. The victory is short-lived. He immediately makes you attempt it while walking backward. Dusk brings the day's final revelation. As you peel off the socks, you notice the left one is slightly damp. Your guide sniffs it and nods. Salt from sweat, he says. Tomorrow will follow where it wants to go. He hangs it from a driftwood stick where it twists slowly like a weather vane, the moisture inside already aligning with some distant current of air. The Silarjuek may steal warmth, but never knowledge. A black shadow detaches itself from the snow, one moment empty tundra, the next a raven perched on your sled, its oil-slick feathers ruffling in the wind. It cocks its head, first left eye studying you, then right, before letting out a croak that sounds suspiciously like a question. Your guide remains perfectly still. Don't offer food first, he whispers. Offer names. You blank. The raven hops closer, its claws scratching the sled's wooden rails. Your guide slowly reaches into his parka and produces a tiny carved figurine, a crude bird shape with an oversized beak. He places it in the snow between you and the raven, then murmurs something that could be a name or just the wind through teeth. The effect is instant. The raven puffs up, bobs twice, and lets out a series of clicks and knocks that sound eerily deliberate. Your guide nods as if following a conversation, then tosses a sliver of dried fish onto the figurine. Only when the raven snatches it does he speak again. Chilugak remembers this carving. It's his great-great-grandfather's portrait. You're witnessing an ancient barter system. Ravens don't just scavenge, they trade. The birds remember individual humans for generations, passing down knowledge of who shares food, who sets traps, and most importantly, who understands the rules of exchange. Your guide explains how his grandfather first established this lineage's account by leaving buttons near good hunting spots. The ravens reciprocated by leading him to stranded seals. Historians often interpret such stories as myth. But as you watch, Chilugak suddenly takes flight, circles twice overhead, then lands precisely where a snowdrift meets an ice ridge. Your guide digs there immediately, uncovering a rusted fishing lure lost decades ago. The raven caws impatiently until rewarded with another fish scrap. The real lesson comes when Chilugak starts rearranging objects around your sled, a pebble placed just so, a twig broken at a precise angle. Your guide translates. Pressure ridge forming 2 valleys west. The raven isn't just scavenging, it's updating mental maps of the terrain, sharing intel in exchange for future favors. You attempt communication, placing your own offering, a shiny button from your cuff beside the carving. Chilugak inspects it thoroughly, even pecking at the thread holes, before suddenly snatching it and depositing something in return, a perfectly round caribou dropping. Your guide bursts out laughing. First negotiation, he explains the gift's significance. Caribou pellets were used as dice in traditional games. The raven is inviting you to play. When you hesitantly roll the dropping across the snow, Chelugek mimics the motion with his beak, then adds 2 more pellets to the game. As dusk falls, the raven flies off with one last croak, but not before dropping a final gift onto your lap. You unfold your mittens to find a tiny blue scrap of modern plastic, edges worn smooth by the sea. "Ah," says your guide, "now you owe him." The horizon melts like wax. One moment you're trudging across what appears to be solid ground. The next, your guide yanks you backward by your hood just as your leading foot hovers over nothingness. Where snow should meet sky, there's only a shimmering void. "Pukak," he murmurs, the sky's false floor. You blink hard, but the illusion persists. The distant hills seem to float above a glassy plain that doesn't exist. Your guide kneels and digs until he hits ice, real ice, not the phantom sheet your eyes insist is there. He breaks off a palm-sized chunk and holds it up to the weak sunlight. The refraction creates a perfect miniature of the mirage. "Great-grandfather called them Silap Inua, spirits of the air," he says, but really, he tilts the ice prism slightly and suddenly the floating hills invert, just light getting lazy. You're experiencing a superior mirage, the Arctic's cruelest trick. Temperature inversions bend light so severely that distant objects appear displaced, often hovering upside down. Sailors famously gave these visions poetic names: Fata Morgana, the Flying Dutchman. Here, they're survival tests. Your guide shows you the signs, the way snow grains seem to levitate, light refracting through warm air layers, how caribou tracks suddenly vanish, actually continuing beyond the visual cliff edge. Historians still argue about how many lost explorers these mirages claimed. The answer lies in the snow at your feet. Your guide points out faint, frantic scuff marks, some over a century old, where European travelers had clearly paced in confusion. One set circles endlessly before ending abruptly at a crevasse. The lesson turns tactile when he has you lie flat, cheek against the ice. From this angle, the mirage dissolves, but something more unsettling emerges. The horizon now appears concave, as if you're peering over a frozen planet's curve. Truth depends on where you rest your head, your guide observes. A sudden wind shreds the illusion. The floating hills snap back to earth with an almost audible click, but your guide warns against relief. Pukak often comes in pairs. Sure enough, as you crest the next ridge, a second mirage materializes. A phantom village of upside-down igloos hovering above the ice. This one, though, feels different. The ice prism reveals no inversion. The igloos don't waver like normal mirages. Your guide grows very still. "Kalupalik territory," he murmurs. "These aren't optical illusions. They're Inukshuit stone markers placed generations ago to warn of thin ice. Their reflections are being cast upward by some trick of the frozen sea beneath you." You take a cautious step forward. The snow groans a warning you feel in your ribs. The village of reflections shivers. Some illusions, it seems, exist for a reason. A knee-high stack of stones materializes from the whiteness, not a natural formation, but something deliberate. The rocks are balanced with impossible precision, the top stones slightly offset to cast an arrow-like shadow across the others. Your guide runs a reverent finger along the lowest rock's windward edge, where centuries of storms have polished the granite to a dull sheen. "Inuksuk," he says, "but not for navigation." You're looking at a frozen message board. The slight tilt of the third stone indicates direction traveled. Lichen growth on the north face dates the stack to at least 3 winters past. Most intriguing are the tiny notches along the base, not tool marks but deliberate grooves worn by generations of travelers adding their own pebbles to the pile. Your guide adds his stone now, placing it just so atop the others. The structure doesn't just endure the addition, it becomes more stable, the new weight locking the older stones into place. Historians often frame these cairns as simple trail markers, but crouching here, you realize they're living archives. Your guide shows you how to read the spaces between rocks. The narrowest gaps align with summer solstice sunrise, the widest point toward caribou migration paths. Some stones bear almost invisible scratch marks. Tallies of successful hunts, warnings of predators, or perhaps just doodles from bored travelers. One flat rock near the base has been worn smooth on one side, likely used as a makeshift blade sharpener by countless passers-by. The real revelation comes when your guide brushes snow from the cairn's leeward side. Hidden beneath are 3 Arctic fox teeth, carefully wedged into a crevice. "Mailbox," he explains. The teeth aren't offerings but messages, their positions indicating everything from nearby fresh water to storm patterns. One tooth points unnervingly toward the exact route you'd plan to take tomorrow. You contribute your own message without being asked, selecting a pebble from your pocket, collected unknowingly days ago from that treacherous phrasal ice patch, and tucking it into the structure's shadow side. Your guide nods approval. This means danger past in the stone language. As you stand to leave, a glint catches your eye. Partially buried beside the cairn lies a rusted knife blade, its bone handle long since weathered away. Your guide examines it with unusual intensity, then surprises you by returning it exactly where he found it. Belongs to the Inuksuk now, he says. Later, when you glance back, the blade seems to have vanished, either buried by fresh snow or taken up by the stones themselves. The cairn's shadow stretches toward the southeast now, a sundial pointing the way you'll walk tomorrow. You wonder how many footsteps you're following and how many will someday trace yours. The village lights flicker like earthbound stars as you crest the final ridge, pinpricks of yellow against the endless blue twilight. Home, or what should feel like home. But your feet slow without your permission, boots suddenly heavy with all the shadows they've crossed. Your guide notices your hesitation. He doesn't speak, just presses something into your mittened hand. The first shadow stick you carved together, its tip worn smooth from weeks of testing snow. When you frown at it, he taps your chest lightly. Now the map grows inward, he says. You're different, not just in the practical ways. You can now smell approaching storms, taste tidal shifts in old ice, hear the warning creaks of unstable snow, but in how your eyes parse the world. That cluster of lights ahead isn't just a village, it's a heat map. The smoke rising straight up from the nearest chimney speaks of coming weather. Even the way people move between houses tells stories. That hurried shuffle means someone's checking drying racks before predicted winds. Historians often portray traditional knowledge as something static, preserved unchanged through generations. But walking these last few yards, you realize the truth. It's a living thing, adapting each time it's passed on. Your version of wayfinding will be slightly different from your guide's, just as his differed from his grandfather's. The shadows have new stories to tell now. A child's laughter carries on the wind, your muscles tense instinctively. After weeks of near silence, human voices feel almost painfully sharp. Your guide chuckles at your flinch. Ears will adjust, he says, or not. Some keep their winter hearing forever.